This is Creating Your Encore Career and Becoming a Silver Entrepreneur with your host, Lynn Freest. Lynn will share ideas and expert advice from people that are walking in your shoes and living their encore careers, where they want and at the pace they want. You'll start a company of one with confidence and knowledge to live a fulfilled life of freedom and ease. Lynn is a coach and leadership consultant whose mission is to show senior leaders and experts how to start something refreshing and new after a full career in the corporate environment.
Hello, I'm Lynn Freest, and welcome to this episode of the podcast, Creating Your Encore Career and Become a Silver Entrepreneur. This is episode 103, and it's getting the support you need in an encore career. It's an interview with Chelsea Brinkley. My goal in the podcast is to help you create a compelling future for yourself in an encore career, or as I like to say, how to become a silver entrepreneur. And I will also share ideas on how companies can connect with talent that you will provide for them and create value for both the organization and for you. I always encourage you to visit my website and download the summary at the bottom of the podcast episode and to use that as a tool to capture notes as you explore the concepts in this episode. And if you're considering starting an encore career, please take the self-assessment quiz on my website to help you create some quick clarity around your possible choices. Today, we're going to be talking with Chelsea Brinkley, a very smart and amazing person who I've known and admired for several years. From Chelsea's website, her goal is to help entrepreneurs and freelancers create efficient businesses so they can create the life they desire on their own terms. So some of the questions she'll help answer for you. Are you an entrepreneur who needs to get some systems and processes in place? Do you have questions about how to work best with a remote team? Maybe you really need to delegate some work to a virtual executive assistant. So in 2016, Chelsea and her husband made the decision to leave their corporate jobs and become full-time remote workers. They wanted the freedom to be able to travel often and to work from wherever they were and to live the life they wanted and to create life on their own terms. They ultimately wanted to enjoy life and not have to wait for retirement to do all those things. So some of the ideas that we're going to explore today with Chelsea is how she helps people create processes. And I know we'll mention a good friend of ours that she's helped that with. What work a solo entrepreneur should consider outsourcing and to what kinds of team members. What were her personal experiences as she learned about working remotely? And then finally, any special things that she's noted when working with silver entrepreneurs or people leaving corporate life and jumping into an encore career. Chelsea is a pleasure to know and to work with, and I'm sure you're really going to enjoy this conversation. Welcome, Chelsea, and I appreciate you being with us on the podcast. And I guess just to get started, I'd like you to share a little bit about your story, the work you do, and the people you serve.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Lynn. It's such an honor to be here with you. So I am a systems person. So what I do is I help entrepreneurs create more efficient businesses. So I do that in a few different ways. One of the ways I do that is through system optimization for entrepreneurs. And that means making sure their systems, their processes, their workflows, all of that is in order and organized in their business so that it makes things more efficient for them. You know, they're not feeling overwhelmed by their own businesses that they created. And another way that I do that is I help them delegate certain things to virtual assistants and executive assistants. So I also call myself, so funny enough, virtual assistant matchmaker. And so I just really feel like it's so important for people to have like boundaries in their life and to create these efficient businesses so they're not consumed by their own creation.
Great. With my audience, the people that are leaving corporate life, as it were, and now on their own, they have complete freedom, but then that's also daunting because, what do we do next kind of a thing? So the fact that they used to have all these systems and processes to support them in the corporate life is now all gone, which is a good thing and a bad thing. And that's where I think you really step in and help people.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs, they get so excited. They start their businesses and they're thinking, yeah, I'm going to have so much freedom and flexibility. This is just going to be glorious. And then they find themselves just completely overwhelmed, where they used to have a whole team with them to do things, to break things up, to delegate to. They find as solopreneurs, it's just them. And this freedom and flexibility that they dreamed about isn't necessarily the case.
I remember last year I was doing an interview with Lee Cockrell, who was a senior executive at Disney. And he said the first thing his wife told him was, I am not your assistant. Go find another one.
Oh, that's so funny.
That's true. People are used to saying, okay, you go do that, and there's nobody to point to. It's one thing to be a solopreneur, but it's also useful to have people like yourself to help us, one, understand what we're trying to do, and then find people that can help us do it.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun to do that. And I love helping people really find that freedom and flexibility again that they desired. It's a lot of fun. You can see just like the weight off of their shoulders when these systems, processes, and delegation is in place. You just feel like, it's a breath of fresh air. It doesn't feel so consuming anymore.
So for my audience, could you give us a couple of examples of some of the processes you've created for people? What are the kinds of things you really help them get organized with?
Oh, definitely. I'd love to. It's my love language, what I love talking about. So some systems and processes that I personally recommend having in place in your business. To be honest with you, it really varies based on your business. Some businesses, they create masterminds, they do podcasts, or whether they do coaching or consulting. So first off, it really varies based on the business and what the individual does. But just some basic ones that I would recommend is a client intake workflow. That's a system I would absolutely make sure is in place. So making sure there's a seamless process in place of exactly what needs to happen when a new client says they want to work with you. What are those next steps? Do you send them the email, the client agreement, the invoice? What happens? What works there? So that's a really big one, because when people come to you and say, I want to work with you, I want to pay you, you need to have something in place to guide them through the next steps. Otherwise, it's going to feel clunky and not leave a really great impression. So that's one I definitely recommend. Another system and process I recommend having in place for yourself is project management. Being a solopreneur, you need to make sure you've probably got a lot of moving parts going on, a lot of moving projects and pieces and different clients, right? So it's typically not just one client. So you need to be able to keep up with that, keep up with all of those moving pieces, and have a project management system in place. And then another big one, I of course have a whole list. I'll just do a couple more. But another big one is file and documentation organization, having a process for that. You don't want things living in your Dropbox and then things in Google Drive and then things living on your computer. What happens if your computer crashes? Putting it in a cloud software like Dropbox or Google Drive, but honestly, just figuring out what works best for you as far as that file and documentation organization. Have it organized in folders, have all of your standard operating procedures placed in one folder, keep it organized there. Everyone kind of works differently in that what makes the most sense to them. So just having some sort of system that works for you in that regard. And then another big one, which you may not feel like it is a big one at first getting started, but customer support. So when a client reaches out to you or delegating those things to someone responding on your behalf, what happens when someone can't access a product that they purchased or a course that they purchased? Having a process in place for that, and definitely creating those email templates. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel. There's no reason to type the same email over and over. Just create an email template, copy and paste, put in their name. It works wonders.
So another thing is people who start out being solo entrepreneurs, how do you help them step through, hey, you know what? You should outsource this. One, either you shouldn't spend your time on it, or two, somebody else does this a lot better than you do.
Yeah, definitely. I think the overall goal in a business, especially as a solopreneur, is to, for me, and kind of the way that I go about it, is to systemize as much as possible. Then you want to automate as much as possible. Let's be honest, some things just have to be done manually. It is what it is, but automate as much as possible and then delegate. So what I like to do is when I step in and help someone go through this, we first decide what systems are needed in the business. I have a whole list we can go through. And again, like I mentioned, it really varies based on how the business is set up. If you don't do masterminds, we don't need to have a standard operating procedure for masterminds. There's no need for that. So really figuring out what those systems are needed in the business. And the way that we go about that is that I ask some key questions. What are the areas that feel the most unorganized? what drains you? What, when you're doing it, you just feel like, oh, this is a mess. I just feel like we need to get something in place. Like, I promise we mentioned something or we mentioned a particular system and you're going to go, ugh, I don't want to talk about that. And then that's the pain point. And that's the one that we need to address first. Another way that we figure out what systems are needed in the business is we do a task audit. So we simply have a spreadsheet. I have a template for that. And we write down everything that's taking up your time and how much time it's taking up. So then we can calculate that and go, Lynn, if we delegate this to someone for this hourly rate, et cetera, you can get back 15 hours in your week. And then you look at the opportunity cost. Is the cost of that individual worth me having 15 hours back? More often than not, the answer is yes. So that's another way that we go about it. Going through that task audit for sure is really helpful.
And I know our mutual friend Mike Kim said you and he sat down for an extended period of time just to pull his business all together. So it's not something you want to take lightly, and it'll take a little time, but it's well worth it. I think you'll agree.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We spent, a whole day and a half, and he did not enjoy it. We were poking, and I was poking and prying about his business. And what about this? What about this? And honestly, at the end of doing that, it does feel really draining. And it feels like, wow, I don't have as much organized and in place as I thought. But I think clarity first is, the answer there, and then we can fix it. I know it's not enjoyable, but it totally is worth it. And he has definitely gotten back so much time in his business, delegating things and having these systems in place where they just run and he doesn't have to worry about a single thing.
So as you help people, as their business becomes more mature, we talk about delegating and stuff. What's the team that some of the people you've seen in your experience create? How many people? They all have different skills, I realize. What are some of the teams look like?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like the first hire is typically a virtual assistant or an executive assistant. There's different levels there. Typically, delegating those things is the first thing I see because I come from a place of do the things that only you can do. So those administrative things, do you have to do them? No. You don't. Like someone can handle your email management, your calendar management with some training of how you like things done and your preferences. Absolutely. But do the things that only you can do in your business because those are the money making and income providing things, right? All of the rest really just needs to be delegated. If financially able to do that. And it's kind of like a seesaw, you give a little bit so that you have more time back and then you can make more to delegate things. It's a seesaw in that nature, but absolutely the virtual assistant, executive assistant is typically the first hire that I see. And then from there, some other teams that I've seen, again, it really varies on the person's business, but if social media is a big piece of their business, so a social media manager, having someone create the social posts. Again, once they've learned your voice and your brand and how you speak, you don't really have to do those things anymore. You can just send them the pictures and create a folder for that. They can do it for you. So definitely those. And then I think once even more growth happens is I see entrepreneurs, solopreneurs bring in an integrator. And so an integrator is really, the way that I describe it is, it's like the COO. So they really handle the operations. It's the COO to the CEO. So they mostly handle all the operations. They communicate with the team. Essentially, at this point, they're running the business and the solopreneur is the face behind it all. And it's their ideas. They really step into the visionary role, and your integrator runs things, communicates with the team, delegates things that need to be done, and everything that the visionary goes, I have an idea. And then the integrator's like, okay, I'm going to poke holes in your idea just to make sure that we've got it all right. And then 2, I'm going to lay out a plan and we're going to implement it with the team.
I know in my case, I hired an executive to help with writing, copywriting. I'm a good engineer. I'm not necessarily all that good at writing. She can change my words that aren't necessarily good into something really nice looking. And then the other one I hired was, again, a person we both know, Danny Osmond, to do my podcast, because I can talk, I can do the podcast, but I'm not a technical expert at all that, nor did I feel like I wanted to spend the time to do that. Because I'd talked to other colleagues that they devoted a lot of time to learning how to edit and publish podcasts. And I thought it was in my best interest to have someone else do that for me.
Absolutely. And I think whenever you're considering bringing on either a team member, a contractor, or delegating a piece of your business out, ask the simple question of what drains you. We have different things in our businesses that fill us up. I really love doing coaching calls. It really fills me up. But there's other administrative things that completely drain me. So those things that drain you or are really time intensive, just like you said, you just don't want to put all that time into learning how to do it. Delegate those things to someone else, because the things that aren't our strengths are the strengths of other people. And so let's just let everyone work and step into their strengths.
Yeah. In Danny's case with his talents, he makes me sound amazing, more so than I think I am.
He's incredible.
I think, again, my audience, as they get used to it, now they'll probably be working remotely. And I know you've had a lot of experience, obviously, working remotely. What are some of the things that are different in remote work versus the corporate work, I guess? If you're of course, now everybody had to work remotely in the last year, so we all found out a little bit about it, but I know you've had it longer than that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I stepped away several years ago, pre-pandemic, to work remotely before it was cool, before it was a thing and really popular and that sort of stuff. Yeah, I stepped away from the corporate world. I definitely came from cubicle life, and I realized for myself, I really wanted more than 15 days off a year. That's just the situation that I was in, 15, PTO days. And I really desired more than that. And I got to a place where I realized what I was doing in my job, I could do remotely. It wasn't allowed by the company, and that's okay. Totally their choice, but it's something that I desired. So I stepped away and created my own business and, worked as an executive assistant and worked my way up to creating this thing. And it's been really fun. Definitely has had its challenges, of course, with anything. But yeah, so I've been working remotely for many years. And some key things there that I think are super important is communication. So whatever that looks like for you, your team, your clients, what have you, communicating and over communicating is key, because we're so used to, or with your audience, they may be so used to just stopping into someone's office next door or going to lunch together or something like that. And because you don't have your team members around you directly in the next office or even in the same building, goodness, they could be across the country, and your clients, you really need to make sure you over communicate. So doing that, I think is great. Another thing that actually is kind of difficult about remote work is, again, you don't have those team members in the office next to you. So when you don't know the answer to something, or if you're like, I'm not sure how to do this thing, it's really difficult, because you used to be able to go, hey, Susie in the office over here, how do you do that? Can you walk me through that? And, you're both staring at the same computer. That's not the case these days. So one of the key characteristic traits that I look for in remote workers is being highly resourceful. Google things, look it up on YouTube and figure that out. Reach out to your network or community or anybody that you know. So being highly resourceful. And I think another one is people get so excited about remote work and they're like, oh, I'm going to travel. I'm going to work from all these places. That's amazing. I'm all about that. But you have to have boundaries between your work and your travel. So really figuring that out. To be honest with you, Lynn, I have some clients that are not great traveling remote workers. Their business just completely shuts down when they're traveling. For myself and my husband, we've been doing it for a while. So we've created those boundaries of, okay, we're going to work until 2:00 today. And then after that, we get to enjoy the location where we are. We get to have fun, but we have to be really strict about those boundaries. Otherwise, it can just feel like you're on vacation the whole time and then you end up broke. So you have to balance that.
I can appreciate that. And that's certainly been my struggles when I say, well, I can do this while we're traveling. But then I'll have to set aside some time to do that. Obviously, it's easy. Oh, let's go out for breakfast, or let's go see this, and let's be spontaneous. Then you don't end up getting much done, which is, again, if I work for myself, that's my own problem. But one question, and I guess it'll be what you find working with people like me. As those of us who are more experienced, but we're all tend to be digital immigrants. We're not people who grew up with technology. Have you had any people there where you've had to help them with the fact that, again, we're just not as familiar, comfortable, or knowledgeable about digital technology? Any thoughts about that?
Oh, absolutely. I've helped many, I think you call it silver entrepreneurs. So, yeah, I've definitely helped many. And I think the unique thing about working with that audience that I've personally noticed, given what I do and creating these systems and processes, is they're a lot more conscious of time. What I mean by that is they don't want their calendars packed. They're very like, no, I want to enjoy my time. I have put in my years of corporate world or their previous workplaces where they've been at the office from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day, and they're just worn out. And they're so excited about starting their own thing so that they can have control of their calendar and their schedule and doing the things that they want to do, not the things that they feel like they have to do or are being told to do. And so I think they're a lot more conscious of their time, their schedule, their calendar, and really just a lot more thoughtful of that. So when I've stepped in to help there in doing the calendar management, helping with that calendar and schedule process, one of the things that I can help with is we talk through it of let's batch your days. If you're doing a lot of coaching calls or consulting or anything like that, let's batch your days so that we get all that in maybe on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and you've got Monday, Wednesday, Friday off, or however it works best for them. But we definitely have a deep dive conversation of if you could have your calendar any way you want it, which you can, what does that look like for you? How do we want to arrange this? How do we want to set that up? And then from there, we can create scheduling links that we use in Calendly so that when people want to book a time with you, those are the only options that they have. And if they want to speak to you, it is what it is because you're in control of your calendar.
Okay, great. Another thing, as you were talking, reminded me that in today's world, we're all concerned, and it's probably become more of a concern with well-being. You have any strategies where you help your clients? Because, again, people like myself are used to working long days, long hours, and it's hard for us to step back from that too. But as you mentioned, controlling the time is one thing. Any other thoughts as you've helped your clients with respect to that wider scope of well-being? Yeah,
and I'm so glad you brought that up because it's really important to factor that into your schedule. So sometimes I have to, whenever I talk to an entrepreneur about what their schedule is or what they want it to look like, I have a little bit of an honest conversation with them of going, are you wearing yourself too thin here? Like, can we just look at your schedule and look at how insane this is? From sun up to sundown, you're working. When do you have family time? When do you separate something that's really difficult, to be honest, these days with remote work? And it's such a challenge is breaking up your work and your home life. So how do we create those boundaries? So really what it comes down to is a little bit of a tough love, honest conversation of, let's figure this out. And how are you feeling about this? Are you feeling run down? Are you feeling burned out? It's your own doing, but we can fix it. So I'm really glad you brought that up because it's really important. Time, I feel like, is our greatest asset. And so I don't think we're going to get to the end of our life and go, I'm so glad I worked those extra hours. So just being thoughtful of that.
No, and especially for, again, people of my generation, it's sort of a balancing act because, like I said, we're used to powering through, working a lot of hours. On the other hand, we've at a point where we don't want to do that anymore. So it's, even for myself, it's a balancing act. And I'm glad that you've got processes and stuff that can help with that.
Yeah, and I'm sure it feels weird when you've been in corporate world for so long, for a majority of your career, and to now running your own business. I'm sure it feels strange to be like, I have free time. I'm not doing something I should be doing. What does that look like? I'm sure it probably feels a little bit strange. Like on one hand, you're like, this is so exciting. And on the other, you're like, this just feels odd. So I understand that too.
Yeah, I'm just reading about a guy who has an Encore career, and he says he's working for a terrible boss now. The boss is right now is himself, and he knows when he's slacking off and when he's not working and killing time. And he says it's terrible to work for yourself.
Oh, that's hilarious.
With that, any other thoughts you want to share with the audience? And please share your business and we'll include your contact information, whatever you'd like to share with us to close today.
Yeah, I think just remember, have the goal of what can I systemize? What can I automate and what can I delegate? And just constantly think about that in your business. Another thing to just constantly be thinking about or just keep top of mind is the opportunity cost. Because you're doing this, what are you not doing? What can I delegate here? And thinking about that constantly, I think will help us with our time and using it wisely and just being thoughtful of that. Yeah. And as far as like reaching out to me, if you need help with systems, processes, finding a virtual assistant or executive assistant, feel free to reach out to me. I'm so happy to help with that. It brings me a lot of joy to do it. So you can go to chelseabrinkley.com and you can reach out to me there.
Great. Again, thank you, Chelsea. And this has been a wonderful conversation, and have a great rest of your week too.
Thank you, Lynn. I so appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Again, our thanks to Chelsea for sharing great ideas for people developing Encore careers and how to get productive in a great way. Once again, here were some of the topics we covered in the episode: how she helps people create processes, what work a solo entrepreneur should consider outsourcing, to what kinds of team members, what were her experiences when learning to work remotely, and any special issues or things she's noticed when working with people in their Encore careers. So as always, again, I encourage you to visit my website, download the summary at the bottom of the podcast episode as you start exploring the ideas, and Chelsea's contact information is also listed in the show notes. So again, thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next show.